Good evening. Usually, my name is Michael Lambert. I chair safety, security, preparedness, whatever our title is, for your Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Usually, when I start any kind of a talk, although we're well into this program, I point out that the exits are there and there, the restrooms are right out the door, the AED is right out the door to the right, and remember, when the oxygen comes down from the ceiling, put it on yourself before you put it on your neighbor. But I don't really need to do that because we're halfway through this, but I've done it anyway. We're also, Federation, proud to be part of the Palm Beach County CARES program as part of working for the recovery of our neighbors in Puerto Rico and USVI. And we're just really proud to be part of this and this ongoing partnership we have with the Chamber we really, really enjoy also. I'm a tax lawyer in the other half of my life, and I do a lot of tax controversy work. And I see firsthand the effects of these challenges with the cybersecurity. The IRS has gotten hacked, its contractors have gotten hacked, the United States federal government's basically HR people have been hacked, and it's on and on and on. The phishing that they go to practitioners, because I have the ability to basically log into certain IRS databases, and the ability and the sophistication to try to just get me to just click on the wrong thing, which would then allow somebody to literally get into IRS databases and start pulling down data that I had to be approved to access, is scary. It's absolutely scary. I sometimes have suggested in liaison meetings with representatives of the IRS, why don't we go back to paper? Because there's a benefit to paper. You could break into my office and steal my files. It takes a long time to do that, but they kind of move on to the next question that they get in the room. But these are the challenges that we have. But I do want to remind everybody, on the safety and security side, is just the way I started this tonight, is don't forget physical security. Because we're doing all these cyber things, and while everybody's running around with their phone and hoping that somebody doesn't crash their Wi-Fi, you have your name on in case a good person finds your phone. So don't lose sight of the challenge du jour, whether it's cybersecurity, and forget about all the other hazards that are out there. So, as was just pointed out, we have this big picture of what the government can deal with, and quite frankly, the loss of privacy, because the government's got this data, private companies have this data. And in many respects, we like that. Coming here tonight, I turned the GPS on, I normally leave it off, I plugged in the address, and it told me. I can't tell you now how many people know that I'm here, simply because I turned my GPS on. So it was a great tool, don't want to leave home without it, but it was also an incredible privacy buster. Our next talk is by Mr. Sevilla, who's going to talk about the United States, the European Union, Israel, how these different governmental agencies have chosen to address the cybersecurity challenge, from laws, regulations, the challenges you have of having cybersecurity and regulations governing cybersecurity, while at the same time, how does it affect us from the business side, from the nonprofit side, from the individual side. He's a computer and social scientist. He's finishing his PhD thesis in cybersecurity regulation. He teaches at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's a research fellow at the Institution of National Security Studies. He has his BSc with honors in computer science from Technion and his MA in public policy from the University of Minnesota. He's also writing a book about cybersecurity regulation. He conducts research on the value of honeypot technologies to organization securities. He served in the Prime Minister's office and was a product manager for Next9, a cybersecurity company. He was a Fulbright Scholar at the U.S. Congress, and he also worked as a legislative assistant and research fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sevilla.
I will try and stick to the program and talk about deception-based security. Can you hear me back there? Let's try this. One. Okay. So I will try to stick to the program that we had and talk about the concept of deception-based security I can definitely address how the US, EU, and Israel regulate or try to regulate the cybersecurity problem. So if you're interested in that during the Q&A, definitely let's have an interactive session on that. But today, I want us to make the move from Professor Gilboa's topic and lecture, which started at the national security, traditional threats to national security. We saw missiles, we saw tunnels. Then something interesting happened. We saw how cyberspace is used as a tool to pose security threats. Now, I'm going to provide the complementary part and explain how difficult it is to protect cyberspace as a target. So we want to increase the security of cyberspace. So it's not using cyberspace as a tool for other terrorist threats, it's protecting cyberspace as it is. And it's all these data breaches we hear about in Equifax and in the US OPM, Office of Personal Management that was hacked recently, and many other breaches that we hear day in, day out. Now, it comes to you with no surprise that we are unsuccessful in solving the cybersecurity problem, right? Anyone thinks otherwise? Are we successful? What do you think? We're failing. We're constantly failing to solve this. And I want to introduce you a different concept. We always tend to think that it's a good thing to block the hacker from coming in, right? A hacker wants to intrude our network, we should block it. Prevent him or her from penetrating the network. And I'm suggesting maybe we need to think a bit differently. Maybe blocking means that we know nothing about what the hacker actually intended to do. If we could allow hackers into a controlled environment, imagine how much information we can learn about what they're up to, who they're communicating with, what kind of tools they're using, what are the vulnerabilities and exploits they choose to apply on our systems. Imagine this massive information, the research potential, and the potential to increase the security of cyberspace as a whole by letting hackers in. But that sounds a bit, letting hackers in, people don't like that. Governments don't like that. That's why universities come into play and do research on that. And that's what I want to show today. So staying safe, increasing cybersecurity through deception technologies. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of deception security that I just described. So what's our goal? Our goal is to impact the attacker's behavior. We're looking at the behavior of the attacker. I want us to distinguish between an attack and an attacker. We're after the attacker. There are many types of attacks, but we want to know what the attacker is about. We can even annoy or stall the attacker. Even making a hack take longer has its value. We should not underestimate that. Determine who is attacking us, and finally, maybe hack back, attack the attackers. There are some ethical issues here, but this is doable, and this is being done through deception-based security. So cyber attacks are changing, but the human element, the psychology behind the attack, stays practically the same. Defenders, we know our networks much better than the attacker, so let's utilize that. Let's take advantage of that. And usually, the attackers have 4 very general phases. They gather information, they're finding a vector through which to run a code, they do what we call privilege escalation to get some high privilege on our systems, and then they're looking for valuable assets. These are 4 phases that are very easy to recognize once an attacker comes in. So we want to interfere in each and every phase. These are the guys we're after. These are the attackers. They're the most wanted attackers of the FBI. We're not interested in the attacks that they're doing, we're interested in what they are personally are doing. And if we can recognize attackers according to their behavior, there's a significant benefit to the security community as a whole. Honeypots. So honeypots are the way to implement what I call deception-based security. Honeypots is basically a machine that all of its purpose is to get hacked. We install this in our organizations. Any activity around a honeypot is by definition unauthorized and malicious, and we should conduct research on that. And when we build a honeypot, always ask ourselves, how do you individualize the honeypot? How to build a good deception story? it's pretty hard to trick the hackers. It has to be really attached to how the organization should look like, what the attacker should be expecting to do. So you have to be trickier. You have to properly build your deception story. How to make the attacker believe he's in a safe environment. Because if the attacker believes he's in a safe environment, he's really into our system, he's going to expose his or her tools. This is great for us. Okay, let's go for some examples. So there are 3 different levels of deception out there. This is a community that was developed based on open source tools. It's less commercial. There are 2 Israeli companies that actually does that commercially, and I'll talk about this briefly at the end. But these are basically what we call white hat hackers, good hackers, that develop these tools for the research community to learn about the bad guys. So low interaction honeypots, these are, this is a very low level of deception, but a pretty cheap thing to implement in your organization. But it's also risky. If the attacker is realizing that he's being deceived, he might use this against us. And many examples of this kind of deception. For the interest of time, I won't go over the examples, but I'll be happy to have some exchange on that in the Q&A. Many options for low-level deception. Medium level means that you implement the service, but not to the 100%. So imagine if you want to imitate a website, your website of your organization. So you install that website, but not fully. You're giving the attacker what he expects to see when he exchange with their website. And this is why you can catch what he's after. It's vastly used by a company called Trapax in Israel for web application. And again, this is some examples of what this tool is doing. And for the interest of time, I won't go too much into that, but there are many things. There's certain type of attacks in the URL of your browser that can be catched by that honeypot, and I'll be definitely happy to talk more about that. I don't want to get too technical so in the evening. If you feel this is interesting, please, let's have the conversation. I'm continuing to the full scale of deception security, which is high interaction honeypots. This is the real thing. This is the real servers that are employed in our organization. We're not fooling the attacker because these are real services. The challenge here is to make it a bounded environment and a controlled environment so the attacker won't do damage to real portions of our organization and steal personal data. And in the Hebrew University, I had the opportunity to apply research through high interaction honeypots. And in a nutshell, this is what we did back then. So internet is on the left side in black. This is where the bad guys are coming from. And we have what we call SSH gateway, which is a super controlled environment that tracks every session that comes into the network. And in that way, we used OVZ technology to deploy 250 real honeypot servers. So when hackers came into the university, the first thing they saw is our 250 servers. So then we could study what hackers are after, who they're communicating with, and this is very fruitful for the security of the university. You get a lot of data from that. You can understand where the hackers are coming from in terms of their country, their city. I want to show you a little bit of the data so you can get a sense what users they use when they log in, what passwords they use, and I want to particularly talk to you about the commands that they use. You can see here, I don't know if how readable it is from that far, but you can see here that we can learn exactly what server the attacker tries to access from our computers and what is the exploit that the attacker is trying to download. Once you have the source code the attacker uses, this is huge for the security community. We can really realize how the malware looks like, who it communicates with. This was very beneficial. You can alert others, look what's coming, look what's now happening on the net. So this was very valuable indeed. Where do you place a honeypot? This is a big question. There are different approaches to that. You can, three options. You can replace a honeypot within your internal network. And this is obviously more dangerous because the hacker will really get access to the inside. So it has to be fully bounded and controlled, but the benefits are accordingly high because the hacker really feels this in the real environment. You can let the hacker into what we call a DMZ zone, so it's not inside your network, but it is behind your firewall, and it's less risky, and accordingly it's less the hacker might feel that there's something that is not fully into your network, and you can place it on the outside. And this is what we did at the Hebrew University. Place it in the outside, just to be on the safe side and see what's the potential of deploying this tool. Okay, so what is the value of honeypots? What did we just see? So it allows early detection of unknown attacks and can also help respond to attacks like we saw, and use and instant response tools. They are a key component in a multiple layer approach. So you cannot only rely on honeypots, right? This has to be a complementary layer of your defense. But for some reason, only 10% of the companies really deploy honeypots. And you ask yourself, why? What's going on here? And you see that, like I said earlier, board of directors, they're here that you want to let the hackers in. They want that. That's bad for reputation. That's bad for business. We do not want hackers inside the organization. So it's very hard to convince government officials, CEOs to apply this type of security tool. But there's a change in the dominant paradigm of the security industry. We're now starting to realize the value of this, and this can really take us to a different level of better, hopefully, better cybersecurity. Okay, so what's our takeaways? How do you actually do it? So you supply full or most of the service. Remember, we want to trick the hacker. You want to make it exploitable for real servers. You want to make them exploitable to unknown exploiters as well. And you need to make the machine as real as possible, but really control and bound the attacker and avoid noise. Imagine how much data you can get. The access to university is not only by attackers. There is legit communication there, and you have to see who accessed the honeypot by mistake, what is real hacking. It's tricky. This is a big data problem, but if you do it right, if you stay enough time to analyze correctly, you'd be in a good shape. And finally, so like I said at the beginning, 2 Israeli companies are the only one in the world that does that commercially. They really build a great deception story within organizations. One of them is TrapX, the other one is Symmetria. And if you're interested in that, you can go to their website and read their white papers of how they actually stopped attacks through deception stories. So this is an evolving trend now in the security community. And there are really great success stories using deception technology. That's it. Thank you very much.